Hey everyone. Sorry for this small technical break. I think we can start the session now. My name is Bálint Kléri. I am Bálint K on Drupal.org. And this nickname was unfortunately taken on Twitter, so I'm using my full name as my Twitter account. I have been working with Drupal for 5 years now. I was a Google Summer of Code student last year, and I'm working for Node 1. I'm from Hungary, by the way, and I moved to Sweden last year. So what I'm going to talk about, first, before I say anything, all the materials for this presentation, the demo website, the presentation slides, the code what I'm going to show you is on GitHub. You can visit it right now. So this is the URL. It's going to be there for the whole session, so no rush here. All right, so the topics. I'm going to talk about how to write a views query backend and what is it exactly, and how to write views handlers. And we also will touch some CTools topics, and I'm going to show you how to write CTools plugins. Let's just forget this for a little bit and talk about the use case, what we are trying to solve this. Our use case is that we have an external website, a data source somewhere, which has an API, a RESTful API, which means, in really single words, that you can do an HTTP request and you get data back in JSON format. So it's a really simple web service, REST web service. I made a website for this just to show you. Let's see if this microphone also works. Yes. So I made this website for the demo. And this website exposes information about DrupalCons, all the DrupalCons. And so you can get an index of all the DrupalCons here. And if you visit an individual item, you get some information about a certain DrupalCon. You get the name of the city, the year. This is actually has not happened yet, so it's going to be the next DrupalCon next year, sorry. And we get some information about the city, some text from Wikipedia, by the way, and I picked some photos for it. So, and we have a web service. This is a test page for the web service. So if we send an HTTP request to this URL here, we get all the DrupalCons in JSON. And we can select a specific year. So if I select 2005 here, this is just for getting the right URL. We can see what URL we should use for the HTTP request. So if I go to this URL, I get all the DrupalCons in 2005. So this is the web service. I guess you noticed that this is a Drupal website. Let's just forget it, okay? It's totally irrelevant that it's Drupal. But I was too lazy, so I use Drupal because it's fast, you know, fast to build this kind of stuff. So what we are going to do, we would like to show the DrupalCons in our Drupal website, and we would like to use this web service, what I just showed you. And we would like to use views for list all the DrupalCons, and we would like to use Page Manager to go into a specific DrupalCon and get the individual page of a DrupalCon. So this is our use case. And how are we going to start this work? First of all, we could potentially write a class in a Drupal module in our Drupal website. which builds the request URL, and we can write it in a handy way. So as you can see, you can add arguments for this URL, and when you can execute this this request, you get the JSON data what I just showed you. I also made a little demo for this. Sorry. So this is now the Drupal website, what you see, and this is the class which builds the request URL for us. I'm not going into details. I guess many of you can write a class like this, maybe even better. But if you need some inspiration, just go to GitHub. Everything is there, so you can check it out. The point is that you will be able to use this class to do your requests and add arguments to your requests. So, for example, the first request here, we get all the DrupalCons in 2005, which has more than 80 attendees and less than 120. And we get the JSON object here. And this is the request for an individual item. You can see DrupalCon/7 in the end of the URL. And we get the specific DrupalCon, which has the ID number 7, which was in Barcelona, by the way, in 2007. So everything is ready to show information on our website. We just do an HTTP request to the other website, and we get the data in JSON. So what we can do now, we need to build a list of the DrupalCons. We would like to do this. So let me continue here. And we could potentially code it ourselves. We have all the data, so we just need to do a custom page and output whatever we want. But if we want to use views for this and page manager, that would be a more standardized way of doing this. So many Drupal people know views. A little bit less Drupal people know page manager. But these are very powerful tools. So once you have written the full integration for views and page manager, you don't have to code if you want to build a new list or new page which shows information from the external website. So the idea here is that let's teach views how to build our request. So if we add a filter, for example, that's going to be an argument in our request. So let's tell views how to do these requests. First of all, we need a views query plugin, which is, you know, the standard views is a MySQL query builder. It builds a MySQL query, it executes it, and then you can get the data. What we want here is to tell views that, no, do not build a MySQL query. Build our request. Use that class, what you just seen, and add the arguments for this request, and then we get the information what we want. So how can you start writing a views query plugin? First of all, you need to tell views that my module defines a plugin. So you implement hook views plugins. Then in hook views data, you subscribe the data structure. And what you do first, you subscribe your base table, which is not a real base table, but an equivalent of that. And then when you start implement your query class, actually you just need to see what views plugin query does by default, and you would extend it and override the methods, for example, init, build, and execute, and you are basically done. I'm going to show you how I did this. in my small module. Can you see the code? Should I use too small? All right. So just tell me if it's okay. All right. So sorry. So here is Hook Views plugin. You just tell Views that, hey, here is a plugin. I want to use this plugin. And in Hook Views data, which is here, you define the base table. And when you're done with this, now actually we can go to the Views UI, add a new view, and we get a new type here, DrupalCon. Can you see it? All right. So we can go and continue from here. Let's take a look at the query plugin itself. Sorry. No, it's here. So, like I said, the init method first, we just initialize the request. And then in the build method, we add the argument, and the execute method, we execute the request. And basically that's it. After this, you will be able to execute request against that web service. And once we're done with this, we need to implement the handlers. So in Views, there are different types of handlers. The first, a field handler tells Views how to output a field. Okay? And the filter handler tells Views how it can do filters, how we can add filters to the request in this particular case. And also the sort handler defines how to sort it. So in our use case, we're gonna add arguments to the request. And I'm not talking about the arguments in the Views terminology. I'm talking about the argument for the request URL. And yeah, there are argument, relationship, and area handlers in Views, but this presentation will not touch those. You can find many examples in Views. So actually, if you go to the Views handlers folder, what you have to do, you can see what kind of filters Views already uses, and you can see how Views does it, and you can extend those classes. That's actually the easiest way to learn how to write a field handler. I have written a really basic field handler. So my basic field handler actually extends the Views handler field class. And in the init, we add an alias to the query. This is a small workaround. I have written a lot of comment here. If you're interested in deeper, just go to GitHub and read it. And in the option definition, you can add some settings to your handler. What does that mean? In the Views UI, Views already adds the ID, the first defined field for us. And if I go in, this is the option form, what I can extend, and here is my new form item here, which says link this field to the DrupalCon page. I actually copied this functionality from the Node module, from the Node Views integration. So if you click this here, the ID is going to be rendered as a link to the DrupalCon page, which is I specified to go to DrupalCon/the DrupalCon ID, which actually doesn't exist yet, but we are going to there with Page Manager later. So when you have written a field handler here, basics field handler, what you have to do, you have to go back to hook views data, and for example here is the ID field, and I specified that this ID field should use this field handler. I'm going to add some fields here to show you everything. The city, the country, the year, we can add the month, for example. Just quickly adding everything. I'm gonna remove the ID because that's not really interesting for us, and I'm gonna make the city to link to the Drupal page. And I'm gonna set a table output. So we get the information from the web service here. Here are all the cities, all the Drupal cities. What I defined in the field handlers. And I can add some filters here. For example, for the year, I implemented a filter for the year. And I can even expose it to the visitors. So I can get some filtering here as well. And what I have done when I implemented this filter, I just looked into the views handlers folder and picked the right handler for me, and I extended that, which in this case was filter equality. That's a really basic equality handler. That's it, nothing surprising. What my handler does is actually when I execute the query, it adds the filter value to the request argument, which my query plugin will use later when it builds the request object. So this is a really simple equality handler, but for the years, I actually extended this. So you can see filter equality year extends the equality filter. So what I've done here is actually hard-coded all the years here. What would be a really nice solution, if the web service can expose the possible values for a filter, you can do an HTTP request here and get all the values, all the possible values. But in this particular case, I hard-coded all the values here, so that's why we get select list here. And also, the web service can sort by year, so what I can only by year. What I can change here is that this sorting should be ascending or descending. And I can expose this to the visitor as well, so I can change the order of the items by the year. And you can see the request URL here. So when I add a new filter handler, a new filter, it just adds a new argument to the request itself. And when I do the request, I'm gonna get those items from the web service. All right, so I'm gonna create a page here quickly. Let's call it DrupalCon. So if I go to this page, here's my view. So we implemented the whole views integration. Like I said, you have to look around in the views handlers folder, and for example, if you know that you have a numeric value, you just pick the numeric class which implements the numeric handler, numeric field handler, and then you extend that class and customize it to your needs. And you put all the definitions to hook views data for the specific fields. All right, so we have done with the views integration. Let's move on to page manager. So we have a listing page now, and what we want is to, when I click on a city here, I would like to go to a DrupalCon page which doesn't exist yet because I haven't implemented, so the menu router falls back to the DrupalCon URL, so that's why we get the same page here. So let's create a page for a DrupalCon. But first of all, we need to talk about a little bit about CTools plugins. How many of you have used Page Manager? All right. So the plugins are when you add an argument, for example, that is a certain type of plugin. When you define a context, that is another plugin. And when you add a content pane, that is also a plugin. And these plugins should be defined in the hook CTools plugin directory hook. Sorry, you define where are these plugins in your module. So it's just defining a path inside your modules folder. And we have to start with an argument plugin. An argument plugin is used for loading a specific object. If you think about nodes, an argument plugin takes the node ID and load the node object. It does validation as well. So if it's not a node ID, it returns false, so it's not going to work. But the argument plugin is actually the first step when we go to the page. An argument plugin gets some kind of identifier and loads the object based on that. So let's create a page. So the page will be DrupalCon / the DrupalCon ID. And that's what we want. And we want context as the optional feature. All right. So when we defined our argument, it will show up here. Just quickly look into the code. It's in my plugins folder, arguments, and here is the DrupalCon ID. And what it does is really, really simple. It gets an argument, and if it's not numeric, this is my only validation here, it returns with false. But if it's a valid numeric value, it does the HTTP request to the web service, and then it loads that object, and it creates the context for us. So when I add the argument, I needed to select the context, the specific context. And the context is a plugin which takes the loaded object from the argument plugin and it normalize it and prepare it for outputting data, usually. And it does it with keywords. So I can show the code of the context here. So actually, this function is called by the argument plugin here. And when it's not an empty, we can create an empty context as well if we didn't get any valid value here. And if it's not empty, I can talk about this configured value later. If it's not an empty context, it actually takes the data object which contains our JSON response and put it into the context data property so that we can work with it later. But what we can do here, just finish the configuration quickly of the page. If I go back to the context, I can add one more context, for example. So if I would like to always show, I would like to use a context which always uses a hard-coded ID for loading the object, I can do it here. So for example, I want DrupalCon number 7. That is gonna be a new context in our page. And later on, we can use it for our content types. So you can see some request happened here. This is just debugging information, what I output here. And so we have the context. So the next type of plugin, which is really important, the content type plugin. It's not the same as node content types, so don't think about that. In CTools, if we output something, that is a content type. And the content type takes a context, usually, and using the context keywords, we can output whatever we want. For example, I can create a custom content type here. And here are the substitutions. These are defined in my context. This is called convert list in the context, and I can define the keywords what I would like to use. So you see the list of these keywords here, and in the context convert, I can tell CTools how to convert these keywords into real content. So we can use it as substitutions. So what I would like here, for example, add the about the city content into my custom content type. And if I update and save it, I go to Portland. You can see Portland is a city located in the US state of Oregon. So this is the about the city field from our request. So we went to DrupalCon/2 and we get the about the city field from our request because we created a custom content type and used the keyword from the context. And I also added another, sorry, where is it? Yeah, here. So before I added another context which uses a hard-coded ID. I can show you how that works. So that's another context in our page. And when I create a new custom content here, I'm sorry. No. It's called DrupalCon_2. So let's always show the city from this context. So this is going to be always a fixed DrupalCon showing on the same page. So our fixed DrupalCon is Barcelona, which uses another context. And you can see what kind of requests have been executed here. We could implement our own content types, of course, as CTools plugins, so you don't have to use keywords. In your own content type, you can specify what kind of context is needed to that certain content type to output information, but I haven't implemented any. I would recommend you to see the CTools code, to check out that code, because if you know how Page Manager works, you can find the CTools plugins and you can see how they works. So I was a little bit lazy here, and I used the keywords from the context, but you can potentially implement, and I would recommend you to implement your own content types. So yeah, we talked about arguments, context, and content type. So just to wrap it up again, the argument plugin takes a specific ID, loads an object, pass it to the context plugin. The context plugin normalize the data and prepare it for the content type plugin, for example, which can output information from that object. That's it in short. And that was my presentation, actually. And before we start the Q&A session, have you heard about the DrupalCon cookie cutters? You haven't? All right. So we sold out really quickly, but we have one remaining. Who wants it? Just you guys? All right. So the last person who asks a question from me will get it. How old are you? Well, I'm 25, but I guess it's not a valid question. So let's stick to the topic, and let's talk about Views, query backends, and CTools plugins. I would love to answer your questions. So the question was if we can use relationships in Views. Yes. Yes. So yes, of course, you can implement relationship plugins as well. In this presentation, we haven't implemented any, but that's another handler in Views. So you can find many examples in Views itself. Just go to the Views/handlers and see how it does with the node module, for example, and then you get an example for it. But yes, it's definitely possible. So, other question? Okay. All right. So it seems we have the owner of the last cookie cutter. Thank you for your attention.